The Awakening. Chief Engineer Sarah Chen stood in the command center of Galactic Hub Station Epsilon, watching the holographic readouts with growing concern. The station's quantum core was showing signs of instability. Nothing critical yet, but the pattern was clear to anyone who understood the underlying physics. Unfortunately, that seemed to be precisely the problem. No one else appeared to notice. Oh, look at the little human, so fascinated by the pretty lights. Supreme Director Zixtol chittered, their crystalline form refracting the holographic displays in dazzling patterns. Such an adorable species, always staring at our advanced technology with such wonder. Sarah bit back a sigh. After 5 years serving as the station's chief engineer, she'd grown accustomed to the patronizing tone most galactic species used when addressing humans. They viewed Earth as a death world, whose primitive inhabitants had somehow stumbled their way into space through sheer luck rather than intelligence. Supreme Director, Sarah said carefully, I'm detecting unusual fluctuations in the quantum harmonics. If we don't adjust the containment fields within the next 12 hours, we risk. Now, Zixtol interrupted, their crystalline appendages making what passed for a patting motion near Sarah's head. You don't need to concern yourself with such complex matters. The quantum core was designed by the finest minds of the crystalline consortium. Its operational parameters are far beyond human comprehension. Sarah's tablet chirped with another alert. The containment field's deterioration was accelerating. She pulled up the station's maintenance protocols, all 47,000 pages of them, and began scanning for the official procedure to report critical systems failure. The fact that she had already solved similar problems 6 times in the past year without filing a single form was, officially, impossible. Of course, Supreme Director, she replied smoothly. I'll just run a standard level 1 diagnostic, if that's acceptable. The words tasted like chalk in her mouth, but she'd learned to play the game. Behind her professional smile, her mind was already racing through unofficial contingency plans. Throughout the station, other humans were facing similar scenarios. In the hydroponics section, Dr. James Rodriguez was quietly preventing an engineered bacteria outbreak, while his alien supervisors praised him for learning to use the automatic sprinkler system. 3 decks below, Operations Officer Maya Patel was manually adjusting life support parameters that the infallible AI had miscalculated, all while being congratulated on mastering the basic console interface. In the diplomatic wing, First Contact Specialist William Turner received another pat on the head from Ambassador Klex of the Helical Dominion. Your species is making such progress. The ambassador burbled through their translator. Why, you've almost mastered our basic greeting protocols. William nodded politely, not mentioning that he'd spent the morning preventing 3 different diplomatic incidents by subtly redirecting conversations away from topics that would have violated 16 different species' cultural taboos. The fact that he spoke 14 galactic languages fluently was dismissed as cute mimicry. Sarah's tablet chirped again. The quantum core's containment field was now deteriorating 15% faster than her initial estimates. She needed to act soon, but the official channels would take days to process her report. Days they didn't have. She opened a secure channel on her personal device, another piece of primitive technology that the aliens dismissed as charming. The message went out to every human on the station. Protocol Omega. Time to stop being nice. Within minutes, responses flooded back. Every human on the station had been watching similar problems develop in their own departments. They'd been maintaining the galaxy's infrastructure through improvisation, unofficial fixes, and careful workarounds, all while being treated like clever pets who'd learned to walk upright. Sarah straightened her uniform and approached Supreme Director Zixtol again. Director, I must insist we begin emergency containment procedures immediately. According to Regulation 7249B, subsection 12, paragraph 6, any fluctuation in quantum harmonics exceeding 0.03% requires immediate shutdown and, oh, my dear human, Zixtol's crystalline form sparkled with amusement. You've learned to read our technical manuals. How delightful. But surely you understand that. The lights flickered. A low hum began to resonate through the station's structure. That, Sarah said calmly, was the beginning of a cascade failure in the quantum containment field. According to the regulations you created, we now have exactly 15 minutes to implement the shutdown procedure, or this entire sector of space will collapse into a quantum singularity. She pulled up the official emergency protocols on the main screen. Would you like to begin the prescribed emergency procedures now, Supreme Director? Or shall we spend a few more minutes discussing how adorable it is that humans can read? For the first time in recorded history, a member of the Crystalline Consortium was speechless. Around the station, other humans were having similar conversations with their own supervisors. The day of being underestimated was over. The galaxy was about to learn why humans had survived on a death world, and why perhaps they should have paid more attention to how we did it. The breaking point. Within 24 hours of Sarah Chen's quantum core incident, reports began flooding in from across the galaxy. On Trade Hub Alpha, Human Logistics Officer Victor Santos sat calmly at his desk, surrounded by increasingly panicked alien administrators. What do you mean it will take 3 standard cycles to process basic supply requisitions? High Administrator Zexlox's tentacles writhed in distress, their bioluminescent patches flashing warning colors. The Rigelian grain shipments have always been processed within hours. Oh, I apologize for any confusion, Victor replied pleasantly, pulling up the official regulations on his display. According to Galactic Trade Code 359X, all Class B foodstuff transfers require verification from 3 separate departments, quantum signature authentication, and a minimum 72-hour quarantine period for potential temporal contamination. He didn't mention that humans had been bypassing these regulations for years, using a complex web of unofficial agreements and creative interpretations to keep the galaxy's economy flowing. Now, under what the humans were calling Protocol Perfect, every single regulation would be followed to the letter. On the other side of the trading floor, financial analyst Maya Patel was implementing similar measures. I'm terribly sorry, she told the representative of the Arcturus Banking Consortium. But according to Section 47 Beta of the Financial Oversight Protocols, all transactions exceeding 1 million credits must be processed through the Central Authentication Bureau. Their current waiting period is approximately 2 weeks. The banker's crystalline form clouded with anxiety. But that's impossible. We process billions in transactions every day. Yes, Maya agreed cheerfully. You certainly did. But technically, according to the regulations your own species wrote, that was never actually allowed. In the diplomatic quarter of Central Government Station, First Contact Specialist William Turner was having an equally interesting conversation with the Galactic Council's chief administrator. What do you mean? Humanity is filing a formal complaint. The administrator's atmospheric suit crackled with static interference caused by their agitation. About what? Oh, just a few minor regulatory oversights. William smiled, activating his presentation display. According to Statute 12,947C, all species classified as Category 3 developing civilizations are required to have their work supervised by senior representatives of established species. However, our records indicate that 47% of critical infrastructure maintenance across the galaxy has been performed solely by humans without proper oversight. He paused for effect. Either humanity needs to be reclassified, or approximately half of all maintenance performed in the last 5 years needs to be retroactively invalidated. I have the forms here to begin either process. Which would you prefer? Back on Station Epsilon, Sarah Chen was conducting what the aliens would later call the Great Revelation. She stood before the station's full administrative board, methodically working through a presentation that was destroying centuries of assumptions about humanity's capabilities. This, she explained, pointing to a complex diagram, is the actual state of your quantum core's containment systems. And this, she switched to another image, is what your monitoring systems have been showing you. The difference has been manually corrected by human engineers for the past 3 years. But that's impossible. Supreme Director Zixtel stuttered, their crystalline form clouding with confusion. Your species barely understands basic quantum mechanics. Actually, Sarah replied, pulling up another set of diagrams. Humanity mastered quantum engineering 40 years ago. We just found it easier to let you keep believing we hadn't. These are the patents we filed with the Galactic Patent Office. They were classified as primitive attempts at understanding advanced technology and filed away without review. Throughout the galaxy, similar scenes were playing out. Humans in every department, on every station, in every diplomatic post, were precisely and perfectly following every regulation ever written. The result was exactly what they'd expected: complete bureaucratic gridlock. The aliens were beginning to realize a terrifying truth. Their entire civilization had been running on human ingenuity and unofficial solutions for years. Their carefully crafted regulations, which they'd assumed were maintaining order, had actually been quietly circumvented by humans who found better ways to get things done. As the galactic economy ground to a halt and essential services began to falter, emergency meetings were called. Urgent messages were sent between species, and slowly, painfully, the truth began to dawn on the galaxy's eldest civilizations. Perhaps they should have paid more attention when humans suggested more efficient ways of doing things. But the humans weren't done yet. This was just the beginning of what would become known as the Great Reorganization, and humanity was finally ready to show the galaxy exactly what a species from a death world could do when it stopped being nice. Behind closed doors, Sarah Chen and her colleagues across the galaxy shared knowing looks. Phase 2 was about to begin, and the galaxy would never be the same. The revelation. The Galactic Council's emergency session was unlike anything recorded in its 12,000-year history. Representatives from every major species crowded the massive chamber, their varied forms creating a living tapestry of evolutionary diversity. The atmosphere crackled with tension, and in some cases, literally crackled, as several energy-based species struggled to maintain their coherence under stress. At the center of it all stood Administrator Marcus Hayes, Earth's representative, looking remarkably calm for someone at the eye of an interstellar storm. Behind him, displayed on the chamber's massive screens, scrolled an endless list of critical systems that were now failing or severely impaired due to strict regulatory compliance. Distinguished representatives, Marcus began, his voice carrying easily through the chamber's perfect acoustics. You called this session to address what you're calling a galaxy-wide crisis of efficiency. We humans have a simpler name for it: Monday. A ripple of confusion passed through the assembly. The hive mind of the Vex tree buzzed in agitation. Explain this Monday concept. Is it some form of human warfare? No, Marcus smiled. It's just what we call the first day of our work week. A day when things typically go wrong and need fixing. The only difference is, this time, we're not fixing them. He gestured to the screens. For years, you've all believed that your systems were perfect, your regulations flawless, your technology infallible. That belief was maintained by the constant, unacknowledged work of human engineers, technicians, and administrators who found ways to make things actually work. The Chamber of Commerce representative from the mercantile worlds floated forward, their gas-based forms swirling with agitation. But our systems are perfect, our regulations comprehensive, our protocols are so bloated with redundancies and contradictions that following them exactly makes function impossible. Marcus interrupted. He pulled up a new display. This is the official procedure for resupplying a Class C space station with basic food supplies. According to your regulations, it should take approximately 47 standard days to complete all required checks and authorizations. The chamber erupted in protests. That's absurd. We resupply stations daily. Yes, Marcus agreed, because humans found ways to streamline the process without technically violating regulations. We created unofficial networks, developed workarounds, and basically kept the galaxy running, while you patted us on the head and called us cute." He nodded to Sarah Chen, who had been quietly standing by. She stepped forward and activated her own presentation. "This is the quantum core incident from Station Epsilon 3 days ago. According to your regulations, the proper response would have taken approximately 6 hours to implement. The station would have collapsed into a singularity after 15 minutes. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in." Sarah continued, her voice steady. "What actually happened was the human engineers had been manually adjusting the containment fields for months, compensating for flaws in the original design that your systems didn't even recognize as possible." From the upper tiers, the scientific consortium's representative chimed in, their crystalline form vibrating with indignation. "But our designs are perfect. The mathematics were based on assumptions that didn't account for quantum field degradation in real-world conditions," Sarah finished. "Something any engineer from a death world could have told you, if you'd ever bothered to actually listen instead of just patting us on the head." Marcus took control of the presentation again. "For the past 3 days, humans across the galaxy have been doing exactly what you always assumed we did, following your instructions precisely, without deviation or innovation. The result?" He gestured at the screens showing failing systems and gridlocked bureaucracy. "This is your perfect system, operating exactly as designed." The chamber erupted in chaos as species argued, accused, and panicked. Marcus waited patiently until the automatic noise suppressors kicked in, forcing order. "We're not here to assign blame," he continued. "We're here to offer a solution. Humanity has spent years developing better ways to do things, ways that actually work. We've documented every flaw, every inefficiency, and every potential improvement. We're willing to share all of this knowledge and continue helping maintain galactic civilization." He paused, looking around the chamber. "But first, things need to change. No more treating humans like clever pets. No more dismissing our suggestions because we come from a death world. No more assumptions about what we can and cannot understand." The High Council's senior administrator, a being of pure energy contained within an ancient environmental suit, floated forward. "And if we refuse?" Marcus smiled. It wasn't entirely a pleasant expression. "Then we'll continue following your regulations perfectly, exactly as written. I believe you can see the results of that approach on the screens behind me." Throughout the galaxy, humans continued their work of precise regulatory compliance, watching systems fail exactly as predicted. They weren't being malicious, they were simply following the rules. All of them, to the letter. And as the galaxy's economy ground to a halt and its infrastructure began to crumble, the message became increasingly clear. Perhaps it was time to start taking the Deathworlders seriously. The revelation was complete. Now it was time for Phase 3. The crisis. 1 week into what historians would later call the Great Compliance, the galaxy faced its first true crisis in centuries. The Artaxian Trade Hub, a massive station serving as the primary commerce center for 17 different species, went dark. Not just communications dark, power dark. The kind of dark that shouldn't have been possible with its triple redundant systems and supposedly fail-safe protocols. Sarah Chen stood in the emergency response chamber aboard the rescue vessel, Humanitarian Aid, watching the massive structure drift silently through space. Behind her, representatives from 6 different species argued about proper emergency protocols. "The regulations clearly state," began the Vextree administrator, their chitinous form vibrating with agitation. "The regulations," Sarah interrupted quietly, "would take approximately 3 days to implement. The station's life support will fail in 6 hours. But we can't possibly bypass safety protocols." The Crystalline Consortium's emergency coordinator sparkled with anxiety. "The paperwork alone will take longer than the oxygen supply," Sarah finished. She turned to face the assembled aliens, her expression carefully neutral. "You have 2 choices. You can follow your regulations perfectly and write extremely thorough reports about why thousands of beings died, or She let the silence stretch meaningfully. The Vex-Tree administrator's antennae twitched. Or you can let us fix it, the human way. Across the galaxy, similar scenes were playing out. The cascade of failures had begun slowly but was now accelerating. Systems that had been quietly maintained by human ingenuity for years were failing one after another. On Capital Station Prime, Marcus Hayes was meeting with the Galactic Council's Emergency Committee. The massive chamber, designed to hold thousands, now contained only 12 beings, the ones with actual power to make decisions. The situation is deteriorating faster than predicted, Marcus explained, displaying holographic charts that showed critical systems failing across multiple sectors. The Artaxian Trade Hub is just the beginning. Without immediate intervention, we estimate total economic collapse within 3 standard weeks. But why? Demanded the mercantile world's representative, their gaseous form swirling with distress. Our systems were perfect. They've worked for millennia. No, Marcus corrected gently. They haven't. They've been maintained by humans working around their flaws for the past decade. Here's what you never understood about us. Humans don't just survive on a death world. We thrive there. We see problems as puzzles to be solved, not immutable laws to be obeyed. He brought up new displays, showing the intricate networks of unofficial solutions humans had created. Every time you dismissed our suggestions as primitive thinking, we found ways to make things work anyway. Every time you patted us on the head and called us cute, we were quietly preventing disasters you didn't even know were possible. The High Council's senior administrator, who had been silently observing, finally spoke. You orchestrated this crisis. No, Marcus replied firmly. We simply stopped preventing it. There's a difference. On the rescue vessel, Sarah Chen had finally received authorization to proceed using human methods. Her team moved with practiced efficiency, implementing solutions they'd developed months ago. Rerouting power through the tertiary backup systems, called out engineer James Rodriguez, his hands flying over the controls. Bypassing the regulatory lockouts. Life support stabilizing, reported technical specialist Maya Patel. Environmental systems responding to manual control. One by one, the station's systems came back online. Not through the proper channels, not following the approved procedures, but through human innovation and understanding of how things actually worked. The alien observers watched in stunned silence as humans solved in hours what their protocols said should take weeks. Back in the council chamber, Marcus was delivering the final blow. We've compiled complete documentation of every flaw, every inefficiency, and every potential failure point in your systems. We also have detailed plans for fixing them. Real fixes, not just regulatory patches. He paused, letting the implications sink in. We're willing to share all of this knowledge. We're willing to continue helping maintain galactic civilization. But first, humanity needs a seat at the real table. No more tokenism. No more patronizing. No more treating us like clever pets who somehow stumbled into space. The chamber fell silent as the council members communicated through their neural networks, processing the situation. Finally, the senior administrator spoke again. And if we refuse? Marcus smiled. It was the same smile Sarah Chen had perfected over years of being patted on the head. Then we'll continue following your regulations perfectly, to the letter. And you can watch your perfect systems collapse one by one. Throughout the galaxy, humans continued their work of precise regulatory compliance, watching the carefully maintained facade of galactic civilization crack under the weight of its own bureaucracy. The crisis had reached its peak. Now it was time for the final phase. The new order. The signing ceremony for the Galactic Reorganization Treaty took place exactly 1 month after the start of what humans had dubbed Operation Perfect Compliance. The massive ceremonial chamber of Capital Station Prime was filled to capacity. Representatives from every spacefaring species gathered to witness what many were already calling the greatest shift in galactic politics since the formation of the Council itself. Sarah Chen stood alongside Marcus Hayes and the other human representatives, watching as species after species added their signatures, or equivalent marks, to the document. The treaty itself was remarkably simple, especially compared to the labyrinthine regulations it would replace. "I still can't quite believe it worked," whispered Maya Patel, who had been instrumental in documenting the financial impact of human perfect compliance. "It worked," Marcus replied quietly, "because we didn't actually do anything wrong. We just stopped doing everything right." The High Council's senior administrator approached the human delegation, their environmental suit humming with what humans had learned to recognize as embarrassment. "Humanity has taught us a harsh but necessary lesson," they admitted. "Perhaps there is something to be said for evolving on a world that actively tries to kill you." "That's what you never understood about us," Sarah responded. "On Earth, rigid compliance with rules gets you killed. Survival requires adaptation, innovation, and the ability to work around problems rather than just documenting them." Throughout the station, and across the galaxy, humans were finally implementing their real solutions, not the quick fixes and workarounds they'd been using to keep things running, but the comprehensive improvements they'd spent years developing in secret. In the station's quantum core control room, Sarah's engineering team was installing the new containment system they designed, one that actually accounted for real-world quantum field behavior rather than just theoretical models. The old system was like trying to hold water with a mathematically perfect net, she explained to the attending alien engineers. Theoretically flawless, practically useless. Sometimes you need to accept that reality is messier than theory. In the financial sector, Maya's team was implementing the streamlined transaction protocols they'd developed. "Your original system had 17 separate verification steps," she told the bewildered banking consortium representatives. "We got the same security with 3 steps by actually understanding how quantum encryption works instead of just adding more layers." The changes weren't just technical. The treaty included major cultural reforms, including mandatory integration of multiple species perspectives in all major decision-making processes. No more dismissing ideas just because they came from a primitive species. "The galaxy doesn't need perfect systems," Marcus explained to the council. "It needs functional ones, and those come from understanding problems, not just regulating them." One by one, the old bureaucratic structures were being replaced with more flexible, practical systems. Systems that valued results over regulations, innovation over tradition, and actual solutions over perfect paperwork. The aliens were learning too. Watching humans solve problems had taught them something their perfectly regulated society had forgotten. Sometimes the best solution isn't the most elegant one. Sometimes it's the one that actually works. In the station's main control center, Sarah stood with Supreme Director Zixtal, watching the new systems come online. The crystalline being's form shimmered with what she had learned to recognize as thoughtful consideration. "I must ask," Zixtal said, "why didn't you simply tell us all this years ago? Why maintain the facade?" Sarah smiled. "Would you have listened? Really listened, not just patted us on the head and called us cute?" Zixtal's crystalline form clouded briefly with embarrassment. "No, I suppose not. We needed to learn the hard way. Besides," Sarah added, "we weren't just being passive-aggressive. Those years gave us time to develop and test real solutions, to understand your systems well enough to actually fix them, not just replace them." Across the galaxy, the new order was taking shape. Humans were finally being recognized not just for their ability to survive, but for their ability to adapt, innovate, and improve. The patronizing headpats had been replaced with genuine respect. The galaxy was learning what Earth had taught humanity millennia ago. In a universe that's trying to kill you, the ability to work around problems is more valuable than the ability to document them perfectly. And as for humanity, well, they were already looking at the next set of improvements. After all, just because the systems were working better didn't mean they couldn't work even better. Some habits, it seems, are hard to break, especially for a species that evolved on a death world. The era of being nice was over. The era of being effective had begun. And the galaxy, despite itself, was better for it.